So Manchester United are set to make a decision on the interim manager this week, with more talks scheduled for today. But regardless of who takes charge in the short term, this squad still needs work. So we're going to go through all the transfer rumours and noise doing the rounds, from Cole Palmer as a possible replacement for Bruno, more links with another Brighton player that isn't Carlos Baleba, plus all the latest news and transfer updates, keeping you right up to date with everything. I'm Jamie. Welcome to Man United Review. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Let's jump straight on into it. So let's kick off with all the interim manager noise. I think there's a clear, definitive route that we're going to go down now with a former player, but there's been a few interesting updates. So firstly, Chris Wheeler in the Daily Mail said that Ole Gunnar Solskjær will hold face-to-face talks with Manchester United on Saturday as he bids to become interim head coach until the end of the season. Solskjær is battling with Michael Carrick for the role after United sacked Ruud Amorim this week, although caretaker boss Darren Fletcher cannot be ruled out. Despite speculation, the 52-year-old legend is the favourite, and the club have been given serious consideration to Carrick, who was Solskjær's first-team coach when he was manager between 2018 and 2021, and stepped in as caretaker after he was sacked. The notion of them working together again has now been dismissed. So that came from Chris Wheeler, effectively saying that United are scheduled for face-to-face talks with Solskjær today. They've already, by all accounts, had face-to-face talks with Michael Carrick, and the decision's going to be made this week. Darren Fletcher still not being ruled out as well, but the notion of them working together, so having the team back, Ollie number one and Michael Carrick as his assistant, is being ruled out. So whether that means that Darren Fletcher would potentially be, Ollie's number two or Michael Carrick's number two, we just don't know at this stage. Now, that's clearly come from the club, because Simon Stone, BBC, saying pretty much the same thing. Solskjær set that face-to-face to talks with the club on Saturday, Carrick, and so on and so forth. And then I've also seen James Ducker from The Times saying exactly the same thing as well. So that's the line coming from the club, that Solskjær set for face-to-face talks today with, Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada, maybe Sir Jim as well. And we should be getting a decision this week. On the situation, though, Fabrizio Romano said that Manchester United already had direct meetings with Ole Gunnar Solskjær and with Michael Carrick. Manchester United by next week want to announce who is going to be their interim manager. United want the new interim manager to be unveiled next week, because there's the Manchester derby. So to have the interim coach is important to United. United are very close to making a final decision for the interim manager. So Romano saying that, hopefully we should get some sort of announcement or decision made this week ahead of next weekend's Manchester derby. David Ornstein, though, threw a bit of a spanner in the works, saying that everybody was saying it's going to be Solskjær. He's a strong contender, but so is Michael Carrick. We must not write him off in this situation. But there's a third name in the frame, and that's Ruud van Nistelrooy. He's been spoken to, whereas Jason Wilcox will be meeting with both Solskjær and Carrick because he doesn't know them previously. He won't be meeting with Ruud because he already knows him, as he was the interim manager not so long ago. But for whatever reason, United feel that Solskjær and Carrick are the two most likely. But what they did want was somebody, whoever it will be, who's got Manchester United connections. They felt that it's crucial in this moment of what you could say trauma following the departure of Ruud Amorim. And David Ornstein also said, whoever they decide to go for, I expect news from the club next week. So effectively, David Ornstein saying that we should be getting a decision this week, but also maybe don't rule out Ruud van Nistelrooy and all of this as well, because the reason he's not necessarily being put in the media and stuff is because he was already interim when Jason Wilcox, Omar Barada, he was at the club already and worked under Ineos, so they know everything about him. They won't necessarily need to interview Ruud van Nistelrooy because they would have had a chat with him before he took over when Erik ten Hag was sacked as well. So that's an interesting one. I wonder if Ruud would come back as like a number two again, because Andy Mitten on Ruud van Nistelrooy made a good point, saying there are some regrets at Manchester United that they simply allowed him to leave. He was extremely popular. So Andy Mitten suggesting that, people within the club regret the decision to let Ruud go in the first place. Obviously, that was Ruud Amorim's decision as part of his, bringing in his coaching staff and everything like that as well, which Obviously, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Looking back on it now, maybe keeping somebody like Ruud would have been advantageous, someone that knew the players and knows the club and is a legend, and maybe could have helped settle down some of the noise and everything like that. But that's obviously Amrim's decision to make with that situation. So really, with the caretaker, from my perspective, the way I interpret it, it's the same four names: Ole, Carrick, potentially Fletcher staying on if he does well. I don't think he's done himself any harm so far. I really like his demeanor when he comes across in his press conferences. I think he did well, even though we didn't get the result that we wanted against Burnley. I think from a managerial perspective, I don't think he could have done anything else. It was the players on the pitch and the circumstances of that particular game, which meant we dropped the 2 points. The disallowed goal, the Kyle Walker stamp that wasn't reviewed. Do you know what I mean? Like all the decisions that went on in the game, plus the a deflected goal, one shot on target. Can see that we know the crack with that game. And you shared your comments on that as well after it. So, I don't think he's doing himself any harm whatsoever as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see. Hopefully we can get a win tomorrow and go on a bit of a cup run. Maybe it does give them something else to think about, where actually, is it worth upsetting everything? When you've got Darren Fletcher there, do we just look at maybe some extra coaches to come in to give him a bit of support? Who knows? But either way, hopefully we'll get an announcement this week. And it is important to get that decision done ahead of the Manchester derby, because, that whoever it is pretty much got a full week of training then to get their ideas across, to help the team and understand the players and so on and so forth. So I do think it would be advantageous of United to get a bloody budge on and make the decision ahead of next weekend's game, because obviously that's going to be a massive game for whoever is in charge. But that's all the latest regarding the interim role. Give us your thoughts and feelings on that in the comments below, as I am sure that you will. Either way, though, it's going to be really frustrating if we get an interim in and we just completely ignore the January transfer window, which seems like that is the narrative, but that doesn't stop United getting linked with players. So let's run through a little bit of the transfer news and transfer gossip, I'm going to say, to start with. So let's kick off firstly with this that's been doing the rounds regarding none other than Cole Palmer. So this is coming from not the most credible source, I'm going to say. Let me just quickly resize that for you so that you can actually see the article. Sorry about that. So Man United plot Cole Palmer swoop with Chelsea willing to listen to offers. So this is coming from Steve K in Football Transfers, who I have never found to be the most credible source of information. So this straight away is pinch of salt material, but it does make a good talking point. So Manchester United are ready to make a blockbuster move for Chelsea's Cole Palmer, with the Stamford Bridge club open to selling the England international star. Football Transfers can exclusively reveal. Multiple sources have confirmed that the Blues are considering cashing in on Palmer, who arrived for 47 million from Manchester City in the summer 23 and has developed into one of the world's top attacking midfield players. United have a long-standing admiration for Palmer and have already held behind-the-scenes talks about putting together a bid for the 23-year-old. Uncertainty continues to dog the future of Man United star Bruno Fernandes, and Palmer would arrive at Old Trafford as a direct replacement for the Portuguese. Bruno has been heavily linked with the move to the Saudi Pro League on multiple occasions in the past, and with a big supporter in the form of Ruben Amorim having now departed Old Trafford, there is fresh uncertainty over what the long-term future holds for the Man United captain. Furthermore, Palmer appears to be open to the idea of leading Chelsea, according to a source close to the London club. So effectively what they're saying in the report, and I have heard a few stories actually about potentially Cole Palmer not being happy. He is a Man United fan as well, not being happy at Chelsea. So firstly, that is pinch of salt material. I'd want to see a lot more credibility than Steve K and Football Transfers, who are up there, in my opinion, with like the Facharzes of the world, suggesting that United would be looking at Cole Palmer as a potential replacement for Bruno Fernandes. So we do need to see a little bit more credibility regarding that. However, Fabrizio Romano was talking about Bruno the other day, saying that Ruud Amorim was crucial to keeping Bruno at United last summer. Now, with Amorim leaving, it doesn't mean that Bruno is leaving Man United for sure, not in January. Summer ahead of the World Cup, let's see what's going to happen. From Saudi, they'll return 3 times in the last 3 years. I'm sure their desire to bring Bruno to Saudi remains. So there is still this whole Bruno going to Saudi links. Who knows? Because apparently it was Ruben Amorim that was quite keen on keeping Bruno Fernandes and quite responsible for making his mind up at staying at the club. Remember, Bruno's done an interview recently which kind of went against the club, saying that, he felt that the people at the club were willing to sell him, which maybe upset him a little bit as well. So there is like a massive question mark regarding Bruno Fernandes and his potential future. And now with Amorim not there, would the club, if we got an offer from the Saudi Pro League, where he's got a release clause as well for clubs outside of the Premier League for around £57 million. So clubs can buy Bruno in the summer anyway. But if the Saudi money comes in again, does it give United a bit of a headache, especially now with Amorim gone, who's one of his biggest supporters at the club? Because I think the club would have sold him if he wanted to go. That was the narrative going the rounds, that if Bruno wanted to go himself, the club would have allowed him to go and would have taken the money from Saudi Pro League. And if you get that money, and if you do that for Bruno, we're not going to get like the £100 million, I don't think, with Bruno being a little bit older and, the circumstances around the club at the moment. But I don't think you could go wrong with going for Cole Palmer as a potential Bruno Fernandes replacement, even though there are question marks around his form. But maybe he is just not settled at Chelsea, because why would you be, with all the upheaval and everything that goes on at that particular club? He is a Man United fan as well. I would question mark. He's had a few injuries this season, so there is a bit of a red flag. I'd want to see him, stay fit for the rest of the season, see how he gets on. But he is one of the best players in the Premier League when he's on form. He's only 23 years old, or coming up 24. I think that would be a brilliant shout or brilliant replacement if you want to replace Bruno with somebody of Premier League proven, young, up and coming, can create, can score goals, etc. I don't think you could go wrong with going for Cole Palmer. So as a talking point, I think that would be a really interesting option to go through. However, I'm going to file it in the take of salt bin and put it in the rumour bin for now, because I'd want to see way more credibility. And obviously we're talking a lot of ifs, buts and maybes. If Bruno goes, if Chelsea would sell, Cole Palmer, although I don't think they'd be necessarily against selling any of their players for the right price with the way the clubs run. But interesting option. Give us your thoughts on that, though, in the comments below. It'll be really interesting to hear what you've got to say regarding that as a potential option. Again, it's a rumour. But, if Bruno goes in the summer, what do you think about bringing in Cole Palmer potentially as a possible replacement? I don't think you could look much beyond Cole Palmer as potentially somebody to come in and replace Bruno, because replacing Bruno is going to be impossible for his numbers and stuff. But having someone of the quality of Cole Palmer coming in, I would definitely do that if it was plausible, which at this moment in time I highly doubt that it is. But yeah, get involved in the comments. Now, let's continue with a few bits of transfer news which have been doing the rounds as well. So this one caught my attention actually as well, coming from Graham Bailey. So again, somebody that we do need to take with a pinch of salt, can be a little bit hit and miss. Saying Carlos Baleba isn't the only Brighton star who could wind up at Old Trafford, with sources revealing Manchester United have been alerted to a potential opening for Mitoma. We can also reveal that the likes of Tottenham and Manchester United have been made aware of the Japanese star potential availability heading into 2026, given both have a historic interest in the 28-year-old. Now, this is because basically saying that the Saudi Pro League might be coming back in with to Brighton for Mitoma, and if that is true, and if they do, that opens up the door maybe for other clubs to come in and potentially make a move for him. And United have been linked with Mitoma and have long-standing interest in him in the past. Goes on to say, though, in the report, we can confirm intermediaries are making contact with all camps to see if a deal could be a possibility. And as well as the Saudi Pro League, Spurs and Man United are being kept informed, whilst former suitors such as Bayern Munich are now covered on the wings as well. So Graham Bailey is effectively saying that, look, the Saudi Pro League might be coming in January for Mitoma for around £50 million. However, via intermediaries, they are making contact with other clubs to see whether a move would be possible. And United and Tottenham are two of the other teams that potentially are looking at Mitoma as well. I like Mitoma. I think he's a good shout, and especially if we're going to change formation, I do think we need to be looking at maybe the wing position, specifically a right winger and a left winger, and I think Mitoma can do a job there. I don't know if he's outside of the age range though, being 28 years old. God, he's a lot older than I thought he was going to be, but he's been around in the Premier League for a few years as well. Premier League proven, £50 million. I don't know. I don't know. I think that would be an interesting profile, an interesting option to keep an eye on. And again, if we are going to be changing formation, going to the 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, and that's the way the club want to go forward, maybe getting in a winger in January wouldn't be, the worst idea. Obviously, we know that we're crying out for midfielders, but the reality is it doesn't look like we're making the move for a midfielder. Even Conor Gallagher is now being linked with potentially going to Aston Villa. So it just feels like they are literally sitting on their hands, not doing anything with the midfield position because they are putting all their eggs in the basket of going for top midfielders in the summer, which I think is a risk personally, because if we're guaranteed to be able to get the names that we're linked with, then I'm cool with it. But we're not. The reality is we're just not guaranteed to be able to get the players that we are linked with. There is going to be competition. And if we're not in Europe, or, if we're not stable, we don't even know who the manager is, we can't get early deals done in the summer. There's a lot of risk involved in doing that. And I don't like the thought of, waiting if there's somebody available. But, on the flip side of that, they just might not see Conor Gallagher as somebody that they want and that they rate. And it might just be as simple as that. But I do think the midfield, is a massive concern. I think most of you watching would share that. But if you can't get the midfielder, getting in a winger, someone like Matoma, I wouldn't be against doing as well. But, we'd have to wait and see how all that plays out. And I'd want to see a bit more credibility than Graham Bailey as well, to be fair, because he is hit and miss. Been fairly decent recently, but, not the one. I wouldn't go out and get his name printed on the back of your shirt just yet anyway, let's put it that way. So, now, with the midfield, that's the main area. This is coming out from Fabrizio Romano, saying that Manchester United are expected to emerge as serious contenders to sign Nottingham Forest midfielder Anderson after the season. This is coming from Fabrizio Romano, where he is effectively saying, again, let me just resize that for you. Romano, speaking on the Market Madness podcast, revealed that while there is no clear front-runner in the race for Anderson, he expects a big battle for the midfielder's signature after the season. So this is direct quotes from Fabrizio Romano on Elliot Anderson. So not yet, still too early. Also, because if you say it's going to be a summer move, so it's still early to mention a front runner. For sure, I can tell you he is very high on the list of Manchester United, together with Carlos Baleba. They are three players that Manchester United are tracking. I think they will be busy with midfielders in 2026, and Anderson is one of them for sure. I am not sure United will be in the I'm sure United will be in the conversations. Then there's going to be plenty of clubs also keen on him. Also, the ones you mentioned, Man City, are going to be looking at midfielders. Let's see what happens at Chelsea. So I think it's going to be a big battle. But at the moment, what I can say is that Man United for sure have mentioned his name several times internally, and so I expect them to be serious contenders at the table. And it's not exactly breaking news. I don't think that from Fabrizio Romano. We know that Elliot Anderson is probably, we've had all the stories, top of the list. Who's the top midfield target? It's flipped-flopped between Anderson and Carlos Baleba, but personally, going off of like Andy Mitten and people like that who are well connected at the club, they do push Elliot Anderson, as he's seen as the top target, and that seems to be the route the United are going down with the midfield, where they're reluctant to do anything in January, and they're putting all their eggs in the basket of going for Elliot Anderson, which massively concerns me when you've got teams like Man City and potentially Chelsea and other teams around the world. I heard someone mention the other day Bayern Munich potentially interested in him. Real Madrid have been linked with, rumored to be looking at Anderson as well. There's going to be a lot of competition, and I don't know. I don't like sitting on our hands, not doing anything, putting all our eggs in one player basket, because if he doesn't come to us, then, it feels like we've wasted our time a little bit. But I'd like to think that the club are planning for that eventuality and looking at potentially other names as well. But you just never know with United anymore, do you? I've lost complete faith in the hierarchy and everything, all the so-called football experts at the club with everything that's happened recently with Ruben Amorim and stuff. So they need to rebuild that trust and rebuild that confidence for me personally. But get involved in the comments. Let me know what you think regarding that. And there has also been a little bit of exit news as well that I just want to quickly run through with you. So firstly, Marcus Rashford. So Barcelona have told Marcus Rashford camp they want to keep him beyond June 2026. Negotiations with Manchester United will begin soon with a €30 million buy option in place. Rashford is happy at Barcelona. So that's come from Fabrizio Romano, confirming that Barcelona are now in now potentially going to be looking to keep Marcus Rashford on a permanent basis and take up that buy option. We know they're probably going to try and take the piss as well and get him a little bit cheaper than the 30 million euros. So we'll have to wait and see. But it's good news for us because it's homegrown profit and all of that stuff. And Marcus Rashford, obviously a big wage, even though we're not paying all of his wages, but it's still a big wage bill that we can write off in the summer and all of that stuff. So Fabrizio Romano is saying that Barcelona are now going to start negotiating with United around the permanent move for Marcus Rashford, which I think is good news for us in the summer, because there were a few rumours doing the rounds from like Spanish sources or Spanish media outlets suggesting that maybe United would recall Rashford now that Ruben Amorim's no longer in charge, but I don't think it was just an Amorim decision. I think there's been other things that have happened behind the scenes, and it was a club decision as well to get rid of Marcus Rashford, reading between the lines. The other exit news we've had recently is regarding Ugarte, and a few links with Ajax and Galatasaray and even Nice, I think, have been linked with Ugarte. Alex Crook on the Ugarte situation has said, long term, I think he doesn't have a future at Manchester United. I don't think he's mobile enough for the Premier League. I think he has to go down as another dud signing, but whether they'd be willing to let him go in this window when, of course, they're light-handed anyway because the players are AFCON. Duty is open to debate. I think if it does happen, it will probably be towards the end of the window. And who knows, that might just free up room to bring in somebody on loan. There's still talk of Ruben Neves maybe coming back from Saudi Arabia on a short-term deal, and I think he would be an upgrade on Manuel Ugarte. So that came from Alex Crook in TalkSport, who is somebody that can be a little bit hit and miss as well. So not somebody of, he's not a Romano or an Ornstein or anything like that. However, those suggesting that maybe, and I wouldn't be against doing that. If you can get Ruben Neves in, bring Ruben Neves in at the end of the window, send Ugarte out on loan, although I still think we're going to be light in midfield, especially if we're changing formation now and Bruno becomes the 10. We're already a midfielder light. So I think we should not maybe, I know he's not the best player and, quality and all of that stuff, right? But he's still a body so that you can rotate in the midfield. I don't know why we're not just looking at Ruben Neves anyway for 15 to 20 million pounds. It's not exactly bank breaking money, Premier League proven, good age, leadership qualities. I think he could do a good job in our midfield, and somebody that could do a job beyond this season as well, as a rotation option, as a good pro to have around, and so on and so forth, for what is relatively low money and low cost, low risk for United. I don't know why we're not looking at that anyway, but we'll have to wait and see what happens regarding that. And then on Joshua Zirkzee, Dimarzio has said that Zirkzee's move to Roma is still blocked and will remain so until Manchester United's decision on the coach becomes clear. So suggesting that Roma are still potentially looking at Joshua Zirkzee, but United have not made any decision on his exit in January, although it's believed to be, we'll know maybe a little bit more after AFCON, with Mbumo coming back now, with Cameroon getting knocked out. He's not going to be available for tomorrow, but the belief is he's going to be back in time for the Manchester derby, which is good, like out of the two players, because obviously we had Morocco and Cameroon facing off last night. I was praying that Morocco won, because I think having Mbumo back at this moment in time is probably, more helpful for us than having Mazraoui back personally, but you might disagree. Some of you might disagree with that. So I was happy that Mbumo got knocked out and is going to be back ahead of the Manchester derby. But going back to Joshua Zirkzee, this is coming from Dean Jones, saying that Manchester United have no plans to keep Joshua Zirkzee at the club and will allow him to join Roma in the January transfer window, despite the departure of Ruben Amorim as the manager. Sources have told Team Talk. We understand that Roma have received fresh assurances that Zirkzee is set to join the club this month. And then it goes on to say, however, communication between the parties is understood to have resumed on Wednesday, and Roma now believe the deal for the Man United forward can still be completed. So Dean Jones is suggesting that even though Ruben Amorim's gone and, all of this stuff, potentially United would still be looking to do something with Zirkzee at the end of the transfer window, which was, the time scale wise was always rumoured to be the case because of AFCON, and, obviously Ahmed is still away. So if we get the forwards back, and I do think, again, change in style, change in system, it's just going to reduce Joshua Zirkzee's minutes as well, because, if we're playing with one number 10, Sesko up front, I think Cunha can do a job at number 9 as well, as like the rotation option there. Bruno 10, Mount number 10, Mainu potentially could play there. You could play Cunha there as well. Like, I think he's just further and further down the pecking order personally. So I can potentially see something like that with Zirkzee towards the end of the January transfer window. But again, Are we going to bring in a replacement? I don't know. Don't know at this particular moment in time, but give us your shouts on that in the comments below. Give us your thoughts on all the other topics discussed in today's video, because that's you all up to date with the latest news and transfer updates. Don't forget to smash a like on the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and I'll see you in the next one.